Yes, I'm also the photographer. Well, good morning. Our reading today is from the book of UU World, Spring 2012 magazine, and all of you 8 new members today will be receiving that. And I recommend highly that you read it because there are some great articles in there. And I found one, it always seems to happen to me before I speak, I find an article, it's like perfect. And this was one of those. I found page 14 if you want to go back and read it sometime. It's worth rereading. I'm going to read it to you. It's entitled Occupy Paradise. In the early hours of, by the way, it's by Marcus Lyford, who was an intern minister at the UU Church of Berkeley and a seminarian at Star King. You know him, Charlie? No. Do you? Marcus Lyford. In the early hours of November 15th, I was grappling with the question of who I am and what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist in a time when our economic and political systems are creating the injustices of hell on earth and threatening environmental apocalypse. Faced with the possibility of arrest as police moved to clear the Occupy Oakland encampment, I was uncertain whether to sit in solidarity or sleep in comfort. I wrestled with the voice calling me out to sit on the cold concrete. Would my presence matter? Was it worth spending my one day off sleepless and in jail? In the end, it was not my intellectual critique of our current system of economic injustice that led me to stay seated as the police asked us to leave, though my mind believed. It was not my anger and grief at the city's tragic resort to armed removal of the camp, though my heart was full. It was not even my commitment to the values of justice, equality, and compassion, though I hold nothing closer. It was the chance to be part of something beautiful. To link arms with warm, peaceful bodies, to sing in the face of fear, to sit behind a bank of burning candles with a banner proudly proclaiming Interfaith Coalition. I sat, sang, stood, and was arrested because it was the best way I knew how to participate in paradise, here and now. For me, the Occupy movement is not really about blaming people for the mess we're in. It's not even about clashing with police. And ultimately, it's not even about Wall Street. It's about a new vision of society. It's about finding more creative ways to be in community, to have inclusive decision-making processes, to take care of those in need, and to discover who we are. It's almost too difficult to read sometimes out loud. So today, I would like to tell you how you can get to heaven. Yes. Praise be. Hallelujah. Thank you. Can I get an amen? Amen. All right. You can achieve salvation. And best of all, you don't have to die to get there. That's pretty cool. You don't have to make a financial contribution or buy a book or memorize a holy text or adopt a creed or get anointed with holy waters and sacred oils. You don't even have to be a member of this congregation. Not that you guys can back out now, it's too late. But all you have to do is be the human being that is you. To rediscover and get in touch with your humanity more fully and more deeply than you may have ever done before. But first, a word from our sponsor, the UUCSJS Social Justice Ministry. I'll get back to that whole salvation and heaven thing later. Because today has been designated Social Justice Sunday, and I am the current chair of the Social Justice Ministry, I thought this would be a good time for a State of the Union type message on social justice at UUCSJS. Now, if I asked you to tell me an activity, now this is an audience response thing, if I asked you to tell me an activity that would fall into the realm of social justice, what would you tell me? Name something. Social. Fair trade, yeah. Come on.
Demonstrations.
Pardon?
Demonstrations.
Demonstrations. Justin? Road cleanup? That's a good one.
Feeding and housing the poor.
Feeding and health, thank you.
Animal rights.
Animal rights, of course. Yes.
Environmental concerns.
All environmental concerns, yes.
Pay less taxes.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't think that's included. Well, yes, to these, except for that one. These and so much more. And what do these things have in common? The answer is they all involve service to others. Serving our community inside these walls and increasingly and very importantly, outside of these walls. We built this building. We said that's one of the things we're really going to do after we get our own place. Well, we've been here 3.5 years. What we do here on Sunday mornings and at other times during the week is building the foundation for the pursuit of social justice. By interacting and supporting each other, hearing the readings and messages, listening to the music, singing the hymns, sharing ideas, and yes, even drinking coffee and eating bagels together, we get in touch with our true inner selves, our spirituality, our humanity. We sense the goodness inherent in all of us. We certainly did that last evening, I know, at the fellowship dinner. I felt the goodness. We begin to hear more clearly that melody of loving compassion that hums away all the time within all of us and within all human beings. Yes, I said all human beings, without exception. I'm reading a book entitled The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. It's by Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. It's a guy that I've brought into previous talks that I made, and I waited for this book to come out. I pre-ordered it. It came on my Kindle on March 13th, 5 days ago, so I'm not through it. But he's a moral psychologist, and he's one of my favorite authors. He describes human beings this way, that we're 90% chimpanzee, Michael like this, and 10% bee. Well, think about it. That's a good metaphor. The chimp in us is concerned about food, sex, standing in our community, I'm stronger than you, ego, etc., etc. The bee in us is giving, more interested in the common good, altruistic, caring. I think of that 10% of us, that 10% as the hallmark of our humanity, that bee. When we allow this humanity, this inner bee, to rise above the petty goings-on around us, above the superfluous wants and desires that cause us more pain than joy. And when it joins the voices of this loving community in the service of others, well, that hum rises to a heavenly chorus. It's like being in, I won't go there. I'm going to get back to heaven and salvation later. So let me return to social justice. Now, I couldn't possibly cover in 20 minutes or so the range of social justice activities in which your support is possible and ever more needed, and which you individually and collectively have the capacity to make a difference, and you do, to affect the greater good. It's the greater good beyond ourselves. And where can we find the resources to learn more about that, individuals or congregations? Where can we go to explore social justice topics further? You're going to wait for somebody to stand up here and give a talk, or are you going to do something yourself? And of course, where else but the internet? Just go to the UUA website. It is amazing. If you haven't done that, spend some time. Just click on social justice, and you will get overwhelmed with everything, every kind of program you can imagine. You should also be aware, if you're not already, that our denomination, UUA, Unitarian Universalist Association for the newcomers, I got to remember to say that, and for visitors, the UUA selects congregational study action issues. These are things that we congregations are supposed to be like studying every week and passing out stuff and becoming interested and educated. We don't do that. We haven't ever really done it. And I'm hoping to gosh we're going to start very soon. These are topics that are selected by the General Assembly, our UUA convention, so to speak. Again, just go to the UUA website, type in this little search box, CSAI, you'll find it all. I'm not going to go into it. But there's a full discussion of the issues, lesson plans, useful links, sample sermons. It's a very interesting website. There are other organizations, of course, that give us all this information that we need to know to really fulfill our mission of social justice. And certainly the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee is one of those, UUSC. Remember guests at your table? Remember the little boxes, Who did that? Was that Peg that ran that? Yeah. That's what that was for. That's where they get their money. It's all donations. It's not funded by the UUA. And I want to talk a minute about our Civil Rights Journey 2012, which is sponsored by the UUSC. There's also the UU Legislative Ministry of New Jersey. We should be getting a better relationship with them. We're a member, but we're not doing a whole lot. They work in New Jersey to influence our legislature in New Jersey, which we really need to influence right now, for socially responsible, just public policies. There are lots of other resources. If you want to spend the time, the UU Ministry for Earth, the UU Animal Ministry, many more. So for a few minutes, I'd like to reflect upon the key social justice issues that we have accomplished. This is kind of a little boost for the people who have been working so hard over the years, the Social Justice Committee. First, LGBT rights. I suggest that in terms of social justice, this was one of our congregation's greatest accomplishments. We're recognized as a welcoming congregation. We've got an interweave group acting here. And we've taken all the intentional steps to welcome people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. And as you all know, we have gotten some wonderful members in our congregation by our outreach to the LGBT community. And that's been great. Environmental sustainability and global warming. Thank you, Jesse Condor. Jesse, Stephen Barbara Feeler, John Luoma. This has become our identity in the community. I'll never forget one time I went to the township building, and I saw them coming from the church. Oh, the environmental church, they said to me. Yeah. So we do have that reputation. Our green building, this building is a symbol of that. Our support for Go Green Galloway in our local community, our native plant sales, our sustainable landscaping series that Jesse is running, and so much more are all commitment, all an example of our commitment to the natural environment. Animal rights, we've done a good job on that. Plug my wife here, thanks to her leadership, and Cynthia, and the dedication of Michelle Tomko and Londa. Our South Jersey, we formed a group, South Jersey Animal Advocates, through the UU Animal Ministry. It's going great. We have been outspoken in our opposition to circuses that use animals, rodeos, and lately we were instrumental in raising awareness of the diving horse at Steel Pier. Terrible thing. And it was subsequently canceled. In the next few months, we're again coordinating regional groups like we did last year. We've brought in people from all over New Jersey in opposition to the rodeo and the circus. And last but very importantly, peace activism. And also we've done a good job. During the high point of the Iraq War, do you remember those days? Soldiers dying by the tens and sometimes even 100 in a day. Before the 2008 elections, we conducted regular peace vigils on Route 30. Stood at the corner of Route 9 and Route 30, many nights, candlelight sometimes. And we participated in nonviolent anti-war activities twice in New York City. We went up there with our UUCSJS banner and once in Washington. And I know we will be keeping an eye on events unfolding in Syria and Iran. I could hear the drums beating, hoping our president will keep a steady hand and not fall prey to the hawks of war. We signed a peacemaking statement of conscience in 2010, and I, as your delegate, was one of the people who voted in favor of that. And I did read it, and we had a little seminar here one day before we voted, and a new pragmatic way of looking at peacemaking. If you haven't read that, give it a try. I think it's a work of art. So, that's been our past. We've done some great things. We need some help. One of the things I know we need help, somebody mentioned today, is the road cleanup. Is Michelle here? Michelle, she needs some help. So if somebody could please contact Michelle. Plus we also make a few dollars out of it. So do that. So what social programs are we currently developing? Well, here's the thing that's nearest to my heart. Occupy Wall Street. And I know a lot of people get shudders when they think of it. They think of crazy kids singing songs and dancing and this and that, but it's not what it is. You may recall that we initiated an Occupy Absecon. Remember that? One day in support of Occupy Wall Street. I was very proud of what we did. If you think we didn't make a difference, think again. A dozen UUCSJS members and another, at least a dozen, probably more, people from outside of our congregation picketed, and we initiated that, picketed outside of the Bank of America branch in Little Old Absecon for a day of peaceful protest. In my mind, I imagine the previous complacent bank manager now on the phone with his corporate executives who were asking, occupy where? Absecon? But we wanted them to know. We wanted them to know that the protest had filtered down to small-town America, that it was not just an elite big city movement, but rather it was based in the heart and soul of America, in small-town USA, so to speak. We focused on a $25,000 home in Pleasantville, foreclosed and now owned by the Bank of America. And we asked the bank in writing, in a published letter in the AC Press, how they could justify foreclosing on such a small property during a recession. And did they give any consideration to the families? The property was listed on the BOA Bank of America website. The next day, it was removed. Not that they're not foreclosing anymore, they just were embarrassed by it. I don't think it was a coincidence. I think that someone, somewhere in the bowels of the Bank of America was hearing our voice and embarrassed by what they were doing. A few of us also participated in Atlantic City, Occupy Atlantic City, and did a long protest march. Very long, too long, I think. Almost the entire length of the boardwalk. One day, one end to the other. And on other days, we stood on the streets in downtown Atlantic City with other groups. I should say, a lot of people are a little afraid of the Occupy movement. They think it's a bunch of crazies. But let me tell you, it has the support of the UUA. In fact, we're going to read a statement by our president, Peter Morales. Unitarian Universalism embodies a long tradition of working for economic justice and workers' rights. Today is another opportunity for us to live our faith, and the Occupy protests are a first step on the road to repairing our country. End of quote. That's Peter Morales. Also, our legislative ministry in New Jersey, same thing. They said, quote, we need to wake up, find common ground, and take action by standing beside New Jersey Occupy Wall Street protesters in Trenton, Morristown, Princeton, Atlantic City, Jersey City, and Newark. I am not insulted that they failed to mention Absecon. So what's next, and what can we do? Well, under the rallying cry of "This Spring We Rise," that's their call this year, exclamation point, Occupy Wall Street activists will gather across America, April 9th to 15th. They're claiming 100,000 people in homes, places of worship, campuses, and the streets to train themselves in nonviolent action and join together in the work of reclaiming our country. We have offered to host a training session here in our sanctuary on April 11th. History is calling us. Take a look at the 99spring.com And if you have the heart to do it, sign up for that training session. If you have the time to, unfortunately, some of us do have to work. We're not all retired like me. So what will you do? Will you take part in the training? What's your commitment to economic justice and reform? Will you take a leadership position, or will you participate in some way? Another developing program that we really want to do is community justice. Now, you know, some of you know, we met with the food bank and asked them specifically, what do you need? You know, we make this collection every week. And we said, well, let's go down and find out what they really need, you know, instead of just guessing at it. And their answer was a resounding peanut butter. That's all good reason for it, too. So we had our peanut butter Sunday, if you recall that. We also raised funds to help buy winter clothes for needy students. We raised $1,000 in this congregation to buy gloves and hoodies and things for our students. But charity is a very poor substitute for justice. What do you think? It's like more like a placeholder in a quest for justice as time moves on. So now, as you've been reading, we're hoping to send some young members of our congregation on a journey, Civil Rights Journey 2012, so they can learn firsthand about what it takes to defeat the forces of hate and injustice. And finally, the next thing we want to do, besides Occupy Wall Street and do more community justice, is ethical leading. Cynthia's jumped up. She wants to lead that one, too. I don't know where she's going to find the time. Ethical leading was another statement of conscience adopted by the UUA at the 2011 GA. I was there. I voted for it. He voted for it. She voted for it. Yeah, 3 of us were there. We voted in favor of that statement of conscience. It's not a program that promotes only vegetarian. Most people think ethical eating, oh my God, I got to give up my hamburger. It's not what it is at all. Although vegetarianism and veganism is an important part. It's intended to help people choose foods that minimize harm, that are protective of the environment, consumers, farmers, and all those involved in food production and distribution. So as we've become identified in this community with LGBT rights, environmentalism, animal rights, and peace, I'm hoping, in the very short term, that we could achieve like results with economic reform, community justice, and ethical eating. Well, of course, there's a future wish list. The first of those has to be immigration reform. This will be the primary focus of this year's GU General Assembly in Phoenix. We will partner with communities in Arizona to bring attention to the injustices and human rights abuses that they face. It's going to be a learning experience. And when it's over, attendees will bring the lessons learned back to this congregation. And I don't know who's a delegate yet, but I imagine we'll find out someday soon. Back to this congregation in seminars and produce another worship service like we do every year after the GA. We come back here and we do a service. I think Charlie mentioned last Sunday how little we know about the immigration situation in our own area. So I just ask you, when you see a group of Latinos working on a landscaping crew or a construction site, or working in kitchens and bussing tables, I hope we will start by giving some thought to this hidden community and their welfare. So what will you do? Will you be a delegate to the GA? Will you take the time to learn more about immigrant conditions in our area and act accordingly? 2 more things, I hope. Marriage equality. The marriage equality bill was passed by the New Jersey State Assembly. We all know that, right? 42 to 33, I think the vote was. But was vetoed by our governor. Attaboy. So we have 2 years now to override this veto. And I'm hoping that this congregation will stand up loudly and play a role in our community. Finally, living wage. You know, the Fair Labor Standards Act was amended in 2007, and as of 2009, the minimum wage, this is terrible. The minimum wage is $7.25. All right? So that means some poor person is working for an hour, giving their labor, and they get $7.25. It's unconscionable. It's ridiculous. And some states could raise that standard above the federal. Some have. New Jersey hasn't. Let me do the math for you. $7.25 per hour times 2,080 hours per year, $15,000 a year. The federal poverty level in 2008 was $17,300 per year. And according to the Poverty Research Institute, the real cost in New Jersey for a family of three to survive is $55,000 a year. How could you pay a person $7.25 an hour? By the way, just so you, by way of comparison, the chairman of Viacom, who's the highest paid executive in this country, in 2010 was paid $40,000. Not per year, not per month, and not per week, not per day. Yeah, $40,000 per hour. Oh, well, thank you. Where's that little monk when we need him right now, you know? But that's the way, and this is unconscionable. So, enough of that. This gets my gore up, as they say. So back in October, remember Jack Miller spoke here and said the following: serving your community through your congregation is a spiritual practice. Did you say that, Jack? Yes, he did. And it is important to get involved in something more than yourself. And I agree with that. Service to others is the ultimate religious practice. And by working through this congregation, we leverage our religious and moral convictions. By helping others discover and act upon theirs, we build community and we strengthen our collective voice and the recognition of our principles in a broader world. We can be a positive influence in this community. Pastor Charlie said last week that the work of social justice is no less than the pursuit of truth. And as we know, truth can be very elusive. So how will you respond to the question of, were you there? Perhaps you'll go beyond just observing, maybe, and participating into actually shaping the events, doing something on your own. So I promised you, when we started today, that you can be saved and find salvation. All right? Well, let me tell you how to do that. So take out your pens and papers. There will be a test. This is salvation. It's my view. Recognize and never forget your oneness with the universe, the interconnectedness of all things, the web of existence we call life. That's not just an empty phrase. Remove any thoughts of separateness. It's our seventh principle. And I think it means a lot. I think it's the most important one. And I think that's the goal, to be able to do what we need to do. Recall the golden rule. Remember that in kindergarten, first grade? The golden rule finds its roots in the wisdom of all the great religions since the beginning of recorded history. Treat others as you would like to be treated. I have my own personal version, which I mentioned here once in a previous talk, that I call the universal golden rule. As you do to all else in the universe, you do to yourself. I like to recall the words of, and I can't pronounce the saint name, the Buddhist, a lot of Buddhism in my talks because I practice Buddhism. Recall the words of Saint Zan, who was the 6th century Zen Buddhist teacher. And this takes some thought, as a lot of Buddhism does. He says the perfect way, that's with a capital P and a capital W. In other words, that best way through life. The perfect way is without difficulty, for it avoids picking and choosing. Only when you stop liking and disliking will all be clearly understood. Be not concerned with right or wrong, for the conflict between right and wrong is the sickness of the mind. Just think about that. Look at the abortion debate right now. Never going to be resolved. That will go on. That'll be a war that goes forever. Because I'm right and you're wrong, no, I'm right and you're wrong. It'll never be resolved. The conflict between Islam and Christianity, never be. None of those things will ever be resolved between liberals and conservatives, ever, ever, until we stop working on, well, you're right and I'm wrong, but finding ways to be together. Don't let reason get in the way of acting. I'm not saying don't think. We youths tend to think things to death. I heard somebody say one time when a youth encounter a problem, they get a cup of coffee and run down the basement to talk about it. Follow your heart, and your brain will follow close behind. Right? In my business days, we used to call this a bias towards action rather than over deliberation. The person who always did the best was the person who says, I'm tired of talking about it, I'm going to go do, because you know what's right. Act like the person you know you want to be. Act yourself into new ways of thinking instead of trying to think yourself into new ways of acting. Remember that what you do defines who you are, and who you are defines what you do. I like to quote Jesus. I'm not a practicing Christian. I guess my stepson calls me a philosophical Christian. But Jesus said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. That's what you got to do. You have to hunger and thirst like it's important as your next meal. And I've said this before in previous talks. Discover yourself by losing yourself in goodness. Offer yourself for the cause of social justice. And what will you find when you do all that? Joy, happiness, satisfaction, heaven, paradise, right here and right now.